Most of the free content that you get out there is someone's personal narrative of how they did
Yeah.
it, but it's not necessarily going to mirror what your experience
Yeah.
is.
It's Expat Life Germany. Welcome to the show. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking with James from Live Work Germany about the freelance visa. That's coming up. But first, I want to talk about the charity challenge that I am currently doing against Nicole of the Expat Cast. If you listened to the show last week or you follow me on social media, you will know that Nicole and I are going up against each other during December in a charity challenge that Nicole cleverly named Fegipadfo, first ever German expat podcaster's Advents donation face-off. Very snappy there. And we're both trying to raise money for our charity of choice. And we're trying to see who can raise the most money. How it works is you go to expatlifegermany.de/charity. That's expatlifegermany.de/charity. And then you select which charity you want to donate to. My cause is the Lebenshilfe in Bad Windsheim. They help children with special needs integrate into society. And there are two ways that you can donate. You can either do a direct bank transfer or you can go to my GoFundMe campaign and donate there. And I will donate the money from that campaign directly to the Lebenshilfe after Christmas. And I've got an update for you in this challenge. Nicole so far has raised 60 euros for the Women's Worth Inc. charity that she selected. And I have raised 135 euros for Lebenshilfe in Bad Windsheim. So far, so good. The show is in the lead, but this comes with a caveat. Not all of Nicole's numbers are available yet, so she could have actually raised more than we're seeing, but we'll find out soon. So unfortunately, no gloating just yet. But I will say this. To those of you who have donated, thank you so much. It means so much. I'm blown away by your generosity. On my GoFundMe campaign page, when you donate, you can leave a message. And I'm just going to read you two messages that came through from people who donated. The first one is from Randolph Sauer, who lives in USA, actually. And he wrote in, "Hey Sean, I'm a huge fan of this cause as my father was born with many disabilities, and he has worked most of his life helping disabled people get fair admittance to universities in America while connecting them with employers post-grad. He struggled his whole life with people telling him he couldn't, and now he works all day telling people that they can. Love what you're doing." That's an amazing message from Randolph, and obviously something that's very close to my heart because that's a similar situation. These people with special needs, they need just a little bit of help and a little bit of assistance and someone on their side to help them get into things like universities, to get them decent jobs, to get them trained up to do things and to reach the potential that they have. So it's incredible, and thank you so much for your donation, Randolph. Judy Clifford also donated, and she wrote, "I love the spirit of the challenge between two organizations, and I love the work that Lebenshilfe does." So thank you to both Randolph and Judy, and also to Colin, who donated on the GoFundMe page. Like I said, either donate to the GoFundMe page, link is in the show notes, or you can do a direct debit to the Lebenshilfe in Bad Windsheim. Those details are all on my website, expatlifegermany.de/charity, and click Bad Windsheim Lebenshilfe to get those details. By the way, Nicole also donated to my cause by making a direct bank transfer. So thank you to you too, Nicole. You're the best rival anyone could have. So now let's get to the guest this week. It's James, as I mentioned earlier, who runs liveworkgermany.com, a site with a lot of resources about moving to Germany and about different visas and all kinds of things. And James started it, he says in the interview as well, he started it because he wanted to provide factually correct information that wasn't a personal narrative like you find on blogs or YouTube videos. And that's also something that I found over the years, that you'll find a page that's giving you advice, but it's really just how that one person got some or other visa or did some or other thing that they're giving the advice about. It's a personal narrative, and it's not necessarily going to hold up for you because things are different from state to state. Things are different from individual to individual. And James on Live Work Germany is trying to get around that and basically just give factual information as far as possible. James has a lot of knowledge, and in this episode, he provides a very comprehensive overview of what the freelance visa is and how you can apply for it. And he also goes into, should you or shouldn't you hire agencies that can help you? Is it worth the cost of those agencies? That all comes up in our discussion. He's also running an online course that will help you figure the freelance visa out. You can check the link out in the show notes. But for now, here's my discussion with James. Welcome to the show, James.
Thank you, Sean. Great to be on. Thanks for having me.
So, you're from Live Work Germany. So do you want to just give me an overview of what the website is about before we start talking about freelance visas specifically?
Yeah, so what it's become is really a resource for people that want to move to Germany and don't really know where to start and are researching opportunities around what are the right types of visas or how easy or not, as the case may be, is it to find a job. And then we also help expats settle in when they arrive and walk them through different areas of the German system, as we say, to get certain bureaucratic processes done, because as any expat in Germany knows, it's a wonderful country to live and work in, but some of the official processes are, what's the polite way of saying it, not the most efficient or not the most simple to find your way through.
Yes, I think that's we'll leave it at that. That's pretty accurate description. So the freelance visa. So people looking to come over to Germany they've got a multitude of options. Some people get over here on the blue card. Some people, there's all kinds of visas that there are. But we're going to talk about the freelance visa today, and I think it gives a lot more options. Let's put it that way for people wanting to come over. So maybe let's start off by defining what exactly a freelancer is in this context.
It's a very, very good question, and it's something that German tax law does kind of complicate a little bit too, because if you're a freelancer, German tax law defines that by a certain narrow definition of certain professions, but I kind of use the catch-all term freelancer visa, which also covers any form of self-employment on top of that. Now, the two processes in terms of how to get the residence permit are slightly different depending on which of those two categories you fall into. But for the purpose of the interview, and so as not to overcomplicate things, a freelancer or a self-employed person is essentially anybody that is not working in paid employment and is generating their own income by whatever means that may be.
Okay. All right. So that means for example, somebody in marketing might write some blogs for a few companies, or they might put out some content, just basically freelance. So that would be what this would cover, or any kind of services that maybe translation services and so on.
Exactly. They are the classic freelance professions, along with things like graphic designer, web developer, language teacher is one that's very popular, especially for native English speakers. And then other categories which are classed as sort of standard self-employment would be things like if you run, let's say, an Amazon FBA store, an e-commerce store of some description, right, or if you're starting a random sort of brick and mortar small business in Germany. But I mean, in terms of native English speakers and our audience, it tends to be the classic freelance professions, because those are the ones that are relatively straightforward to pick up work in when people come to Germany.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's also the niche that a lot of people who may not be able to speak German find themselves in, is that they can provide those specific services. And yeah, it does lend itself towards freelancing.
Exactly.
So I'm usually hesitant to discuss visa details on the podcast, because these things seem to change from time to time. How often do the freelance visa requirements change, or have they changed in recent times? Is it something that's fairly static?
The problem here is twofold. The law is actually pretty vague in terms of what it states as the absolute prerequisites. So the law states that you have to have enough money in the bank to sustain yourself, that you have to have adequate health insurance, and essentially, in very, very simple terms, that's it. As long as you're not going to be claiming from the welfare system, and as long as you have enough adequate health insurance to cover you when you arrive, fundamentally you would qualify. You have to have enough money in the bank to support yourself to get set up as well. They would want to see that too. And then the other thing that kind of makes this complicated is that Germany doesn't have any central national department for processing visa or residence permit applications. So all of the visa applications, residence permit applications that Germany gets are either processed by the specific German diplomatic mission overseas. If you're applying, so you, for example, as a South African, would need to apply from this from through the German consulate or embassy in South Africa, and that embassy is going to have a different set of requirements than if you were applying from, say, India, for example, or from Argentina or wherever. And then on top of that, if you're applying within Germany, and I guess we'll get onto this a bit later, but there are certain countries that allow you to enter Germany on a tourist visa and then apply from within Germany. It's typically the sort of first world countries. And if you're applying to the Ausländerbehörde, which is the office that deals with all of the affairs of foreign nationals in each German town or city, each German municipality may have a slightly different process for what they request from you. And as long as they're operating within the boundaries of the immigration law, which, as I mentioned, is pretty vague, then they're not fundamentally doing anything wrong. So that can lead to a whole slew of confusion, because if someone's posting something on a blog or on a YouTube channel or in a Facebook group around their personal narrative of how they've done it, they may be applying for a visa to do something completely different to what you're going to do, which can have an impact. And secondly, the process in Berlin is going to be a lot different, or somewhat different, to the process in Munich, and that in turn is going to be different to if you're applying out in the sticks somewhere where they've probably never had an application for this visa. So yeah, that's really the danger. It's not that the law is constantly changing, it's just that there's no consistency in the way that the process is applied, because it's done at municipal level, and there are hundreds and hundreds or thousands even of bodies that can approve this. If you look at every single district or city in Germany that is responsible for the process.
Okay, so there's a lot of options, but I guess the framework and the basics remain the same regardless of where you're doing it. It's just the details that'll change from application to application.
Exactly, the fundamentals of what they would want to see, so that you have enough money in the bank, that you have health insurance, and that what you're going to do is going to be somehow beneficial to the German economy, that stays the same. But the actual documentations that they ask you for, and how strict they are on that, will depend to a large extent where you're applying to, and also, sadly, the person that you get on the day, and how many idiots they've had to deal with before you walk through the door.
Yeah, that is constantly the case with many kinds of things with the bureaucracy in Germany. It sometimes depends on who you have across from you in whichever amt you're standing in. So yeah, unfortunately.
Exactly, and there are a few things that you can do just in terms of soft skills that may be able to sort of grease the moving parts of that machine without without coming across as doing anything untoward. But yeah, like most things, if you go in there in a good frame of mind and you're polite to them, and you don't snap back at them if they're short with you, then obviously that's gonna set the scene and set the tone for the conversation.
So to come back to the freelance visa, who would be an ideal candidate for this?
So the ideal candidate is going to be someone that has some experience in the field of what they would want to do when they arrive in Germany. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to have run a business in their home country doing that. I mean, you can be, for example, a hobby photographer, or you can be a hobby DJ, and as long as you've got some sort of social proof or some sort of marketable skill, and you're able to sell yourself pretty well, and you're able to put yourself out there, then you're an ideal candidate. And especially if you're a native English speaker, because English is so prevalent in Germany, it's going to be much easier than if you're not a native English speaker and your English skills are, fairly intermediate, plus you don't speak any German on top, then it's going to be tricky for you. But I mean, I don't know what your typical audience is, Sean, but I mean, I'm guessing sort of native English speakers, if you're from the US, Australia, Canada, South Africa, New Zealand, then the freelancer visa is perfect, because I'm guessing most native English speakers, unless they'd spent time in Germany or they'd studied modern languages at university, they're probably not going to be at a level of German that puts them, pretty in a pretty good place to go out there on the standard sort of jobs market and get a normal job with a regular German speaking company.
Yeah, I've been here over a decade, and I'm not sure I could get a German job. All my jobs in Germany have been in English, so I don't know what would happen one day if I need to find something in German. But anyway, that's not an option just yet. How long does that last for when you get the visa? Is it something that you have to keep on renewing?
There's no standard term, but typically you will get at least 1 year. But I have heard instances that the freelancer visa is issued for anything up to 3 years. So my best advice would be go in there expecting that you'll get a year, but if you're lucky, you could get up to 3. You definitely won't get beyond 3, but that doesn't mean, if you do only get a year's visa, it doesn't mean that you have to then leave the country after 12 months. You can always keep renewing that. And the good news is you're not going to have to put together the whole slew of documents that you have to originally. If you go in to renew it, then all they will essentially want to see is that you have that your business is making money and that you continue to have valid health insurance.
Okay,
and cool. Then and obviously that your passport has enough time on it for the duration of the visa. Once you've been in the country for 5 years, if you've lived in Germany for 5 continuous years of residence, you can then apply for a settlement permit, which is what most people know as being permanent residence.
Yeah. Or I guess it also offers people the opportunity to get their foot in the door legally for a year and maybe look around, because if they're offering their services for a year, chances are they're interfacing with companies, they're networking with people in Germany as well. So it's also, if they're not planning to do that long term, it is a short term way of at least getting the foot into Germany.
Yeah, that's right, and it is a common option that people will come over on freelancer visas and then use that as a mechanism to earn some money and legally stay in the country, while at the same time, always having their eye open for more permanent opportunities. Yeah. What I would say with that is, if that is something that is your strategy and you wanted to do that, then you can't have the best of both worlds. So you couldn't be on a freelancer visa and then just take up some part-time work, right. Because if you're going to take on a job, then it needs to be something that either is a skill shortage profession, which means that you go through to the front of the queue, or it means that your employer would also need to show that they'd made reasonable attempts to hire an EU citizen.
Okay.
If you're taking on part-time work, then it's neither here nor there. And you would need then to obviously keep your freelancer visa to sort of supplement that income as well. So that's not a strategy that you can pursue. But if you want to work freelance and then move into full-time employment, then as long as that job is a skilled profession, they won't give you a visa to work in Starbucks full-time, but as long as that job is a skilled profession, then if it's a skill shortage profession, then it's very, very straightforward. If it's not, then your employer will need to show some sort of evidence that they've attempted to hire an EU person. And normally, it is normally a formality, but they can't just go and hire you straight out of the starting blocks. They do have to advertise the position publicly before they offer you a position if you're non-EU.
Okay, so realistically, the freelance visa is an option, but there are a lot of caveats that come if you're looking for other fixed position. If you're using it to get your foot in the door, you should at least be aware that it might not be as simple as that.
Yeah, you just have to go in there with clarity on what your strategy is going to be, and if you want to use it to get your foot in the door, then it's only really going to be an option if you want to spring from freelancing to full-time employment. You can't really freelance and work part-time, and nor is it really recommended, because once you get into the German system in terms of taking on employment, you then have to pay social security, and that comes with a whole other addition of disadvantages in terms of deductions that you get from your monthly payslip.
Yeah. So where does one apply for this visa? You mentioned the Ausländerbehördeamt. I guess that's where?
Yeah, so it kind of depends where your country, where you're, which country you're a citizen of. So if you're a citizen of Australia, New Zealand, USA, Canada, Israel, South Korea, and Japan, I think that's the seven.
Okay.
You can apply within Germany at your local Ausländerbehörde,
Right.
and you would have to apply in the city where you have done your registration, done your Anmeldung. You can't live in one city and apply in another.
Okay.
If you're not from one of those lucky seven countries, then you would have to apply in your country of residence, not necessarily your country of citizenship, in the country where you currently reside, and you would do that through your local German diplomatic mission, which would be
Okay.
the embassy or the consulate. So
Right.
if you're South African, for example, you would go to the embassy or the consulate in, I guess it's in Joburg or in
Yeah.
Pretoria.
Yeah.
If you're
Pretoria.
from Argentina, you would do it in Buenos Aires,
Yeah.
and so on
Yeah.
and so forth.
You mentioned a few things at the top of what they would be expecting, things like cash on your bank account and certain things. What documents generally will be needed for this application?
Okay, so you would need a valid passport and two biometric passport photos. You would need to fill out the form for the actual visa, which is downloadable from pretty much any embassy or German consulate's website. You would need to have evidence of an existing business, or you would need to have a credible business plan if you didn't already have that.
So they'd ask to see
Um,
that some kind of business plan if you didn't have a existing business.
yeah, they would expect to see some kind of revenue projection plan,
Right.
or if you're looking to do something, if you're looking to do something more technical, like if you wanted to come to Germany and found your own startup, they would want to see then a more advanced business plan, especially if you were looking at things like hiring employees or doing something that required some capital investment from the start. So if you needed office premises or manufacturing equipment, they would want to see a solid business plan. If you're coming over to be a freelance English teacher or web developer, then obviously the risk of that business failing is going to be lower because you don't need capital, you're not hiring employees.
Yeah.
So then they would want to see a solid revenue projection and some sort of evidence that you have expertise in that field. And that can
Right.
be, obviously, the more that you've got, the better that it is, the better it is. But if you've exhibited at exhibitions, or if you have a website, or if you've done freelance work on one of these big platforms like Upwork or freelancer.com or Guru, all of that is great evidence. Now, if you're an artist, for example, or something that you wouldn't typically have a valid sort of business proposal, then they would want to see evidence that you've exhibited your work, or
Right.
that you've got a portfolio of work that you've done for people in the past, and that you've actually been paid for it, because otherwise it's essentially just a hobby.
Yeah.
And on top of that, yeah, obviously you need to prove that you have enough money to get yourself set up, and you need to have adequate medical insurance. And that will also depend whether you're applying from within or from outside of Germany, what you would need to be able to be able to prove that.
Okay. So the big thing is that you just know more or less what they're going to expect, but a request at the place that you will be applying at for the details of what you need to bring is obviously, but at least people can have a general idea of what they're looking at.
Yeah, and then the other thing that you need on top of that, and this one is always the tricky one in terms of where people panic or where people often struggle. They also request 3 letters of intent, and they typically, or at least 2 of them, would need to come from German companies, and that is often where budding freelancers get tripped up or get a little bit stumped, because especially if you're applying from outside of Germany. So I mean, let's go back to the South African
Yeah.
person applying for in Pretoria. Now, how are they going to get letters of intent from German companies? They're going to have to be very, very tied into a network in Germany, or they're going to have to be hustling in Facebook groups or on LinkedIn to be able to get that. Whereas if you're doing it in Germany, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's certainly easier to get those documents.
Right.
And a letter of intent, because I always get asked this, what's a letter of intent, and is it any sort of obligation on the person that's writing its part? And no, it's not, because how can someone promise to hire you when you don't even have your visa yet?
Yes.
So it's essentially a non-binding letter that says, I theoretically would employ person X for Y number of hours on project Z if person gets his or her freelancer visa.
Okay. So it should be relatively easy to find a few companies who would be willing to write that, because it's not a contract, let's put it that way, not a binding contract.
No, and especially in bigger cities like Berlin, where there's a big freelancing community and there's a lot of co-working spaces, it's certainly more straightforward to get that through all of the people that have already done it in existing networks than if you were applying in some village in the middle of nowhere and you didn't know where to start in terms of places to look for that. And also as well, certain professions lend that process to be somewhat easier than others. I mean, if you're an English teacher, for example, it's pretty obvious that you're just going to go around and ask language schools. Whereas if you're a graphic designer, then, where do you start trying to pitch your services?
Right. So there are agencies out there that offer, not just with this visa, but with all kinds of visas, that offer some kind of assistance with getting this kind of visa. Is it worth your while? First of all, I assume I've never used one of these agencies in any of my applications here in Germany or to get over to Germany. But I assume that they're quite pricey. And is it worthwhile to use the service of an agency to do this kind of thing for a freelance visa?
Is it worthwhile is kind of a loaded question. I mean, the agencies are pretty pricey in terms of what they do. They will, certainly the agencies within Germany, charge north of €500 to sort of help you with this process. And let's get one thing straight: they don't actually physically go in and do the process for you. You're the person that would have to go into the Ausländerbehörde, or you're the person that would have to show up at the embassy in your home country for an interview. So really all that they're doing is giving you a guiding hand in the background and they're mentoring you on the process of what you need to put together and maybe showing some examples.
Okay.
I would always say, if you can afford it, if you've got 500 to €1,000 that you're happy to spend on that just for convenience, then sure, they're worth it in the sense that, yes, they provide a good service, but if you're a little bit more budget conscious, or you don't really see the added value that would give over and above, having someone literally walking through step by step, then there are easier and cheaper ways to do it than spending all that money on an agency.
Yeah. Of course, the risk is if you don't, then you could miss out on certain important things, because a lot of that documentation, I assume, would be in German when you're dealing with the Ausländerbehördeamts, or maybe it's not the case if you're going through an embassy somewhere. Perhaps they do it in your native language. I'm not sure, but there could be the risks that you miss something along the way, or that something isn't done correctly, I suppose.
And yeah, that's a really good point. And there is always that risk that if you try and figure out everything yourself, you're going to miss something, because with the best intention, even though a lot of what you read on the internet is factually correct, there's a lot on there that's not correct. Let me just say as well. But even if you're reading a well-respected blog and everything on there is factually correct, or a YouTube channel or a podcast for that matter, it doesn't necessarily mean that your situation is going to be a mirror image of that person's experience. And most of the free content that you get out there is someone's personal narrative of how they did it, but it's not necessarily going to mirror what your experience is. So the risk that comes in trying to do everything for free and not spending a penny on it is significant. So if you were going to ask me, is it better to use an agency or try and figure everything out for free, I would say hire an agency, even though they're expensive. Trying to do everything on your own and not investing in any expert advice is a bit of a fool's garden, and it will come and bite you on the backside further down the line. Even if you get your visa, you may end up in tax trouble because of certain things that you didn't do or didn't realize you had to do once you've actually got your permit and you're setting up your business.
So that leads me on to one of the other questions that I had for you, and I guess we touched on it earlier, is a visa is just the one part of the picture. Do you have to set up legal entities, or what do you have to do from a legal aspect to set up your freelance work?
It depends on what you do, and in some cases, yes, you would need to get your qualifications formally recognized, especially if you're working for yourself in some kind of healthcare or medical profession. But let's just assume you're a regular run-of-the-mill freelancer. Once you've got your residence permit, once you've got that magic sticker in your passport, or you would then typically need to you would need to register your business, and it depends on whether you're classed as being a freelancer or as being a sole trader, sole proprietorship business, as to what you need to do next. If you're a freelancer, it's easy. You just need to then go down to the Finanzamt or download the form off the internet. It's called the Fragebogen zur steuerlichen Erfassung. Don't say that after you've had a few beers. And that essentially is a form that's about 6 pages long, and you're essentially then telling the German tax authorities who you are and what your business is. So as you then, once you submit that form, you then get a unique tax number that is related to your business, and that's different to if you're an employee you also get a tax identification number as an employee. If you're considered a sole trader or sole proprietor business, there is one extra step before you do that, and that is that you have to go to the Gewerbeamt and register your business entity with them. And that's a pretty straightforward process. It's about a 3-page long document, or at least it was in Wiesbaden where I did mine. And you pay about €30, and then your business is registered with the local municipality.
Right. Okay.
What differs in Germany to many other countries, or certainly the UK, is that if you're starting a small business in Germany, be it a freelance business or a sole trader, sole proprietorship business, there's not really the opportunity to set up a limited company in Germany. Well, there is, but it's outrageously expensive. You need €25,000 worth of starting capital to start a limited company in Germany, whereas in the UK you need £1. So it doesn't take a genius to work out that you're probably not going to go down that route.
Yeah,
if you're founding your own startup, then obviously it's a different ball game.
Yeah,
but yeah, you're not going to be a limited company.
Okay. Cool. Well, this has been great information. I think it'll be really helpful to anyone that's thinking about going down this route. Now, you offer a course on this, don't you? You have an online course for the freelance visa.
Yeah, that's right. We've just launched it, and what I wanted to do with the course really was to pitch something in the middle of, for anyone that doesn't want to or maybe can't afford to go down the route of going through an agency and spending all of that money, but at the same time realizes the risks of trying to figure out everything for free, just reading stuff on the internet. I wanted to pitch it in a position that it was affordable and accessible to pretty much everybody, but still covers all of the main pointers that you need to consider when applying for this visa. So yeah, we launched it on the 31st of October, so we've been live for about 3 weeks now.
Right.
And yeah, we walk you through module by module in video modules with some downloadable PDFs and some real life examples. In a course, it's about 3 hours of video content. It's all delivered online. It's me delivering it to camera in most cases, with also some sort of actual sort of workshop examples of walking you through different aspects too.
Very cool. Okay. Well, that's I think that sounds very helpful, and they can find it on your website. I'll put a link to that and your other details in the show notes, so people can click on it. I've never tried it, so people, if you try it out, write some feedback and let us know what you think. And yeah, go give it a go.
And the other thing with it as well is you get ongoing access to a reserved Facebook group for participants of the course. So if there is anything that you're stuck on that we've not covered in the course material, as long as you're not asking me for legal or tax advice, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a tax advisor. They're expensive for a reason, guys. I wish I was earning €200 per hour. Then we've got the Facebook group for that as well. So yeah, you can as Sean, as you said, if you can link it up in the notes, that would be awesome.
Will do.
Yeah,
will do. I found this has been very very helpful. You've got a lot of knowledge, and it's very good talking to you.
No, likewise. Thank you for inviting me, and it's been great to chat. And I hope all of your listeners have managed to get some clarity. And if they are, so if they have stumbled upon you and are interested in moving to Germany but aren't really quite sure how, especially if you're a native English speaker, then really the freelancer visa is a fantastic option because
Yeah.
it gives you an easy way through the door. Without having to have a job offer or be a nurse or a computer programmer like most other countries want you to be to give you a
Yeah.
visa.
Yeah. All right, James. Well, thanks very much for joining, and we'll talk again sometime in the future.
Awesome to catch up with you, Sean. Thanks for inviting me on, and yeah, keep up what you're doing. It's a great show.
Thank you. All right, that was James about the freelance visa. And if you want to check out his online course, it's at liveworkgermany.com/freelance visa. That link is in the show notes as well. So that's it for this week. You should join the Expat Life Germany Facebook group if you want to discuss this or any other episodes. Quite a few of the guests are available in that group as well. So if you have questions directly to the guests, you can ask them in that group. So it's the Expat Life Germany Facebook group. Not to be confused with the Expat Life Germany Facebook page. If you go to the Facebook page, that's just basically where I post the details from every episode. It's not the group. Find the group that's linked to that page and request to join it. And if you want to go to expatlifegermany.de, you can also subscribe to my newsletter there. Just click around and you'll see a link to join my newsletter. I will provide you with information every month. Now, for those that are subscribed to my newsletter, yeah, I know, there was no November newsletter, okay? We had a baby in October. These things are a lot of work, and we have 2 other children. There's like a football team in my house right now. So I will get around to sending that newsletter out, but generally I send it out every month. So yeah, there's that. Music in this episode, theme song by my band 10 Cent Janes. Other music in the episode, Until the End by Ryan Anderson. Follow me on Instagram, Expat Life Germany. Follow me on Twitter, Expat Life DE. And as I said, Facebook, I've got a page and a group. Join it. See you next week. Auf Wiederhören.